This program is brought to you by realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. With more properties for sale than anywhere else, we make it easier.
Welcome back. There are 2,100 auctions scheduled to take place this week. That's up about 3% when compared to the same week last year. New South Wales will host 803 auctions, with about 100 of them outside of Sydney. Victoria will host 821 auctions, with most of them in Melbourne. Queensland will hold 258 auctions, with 117 of them in regional areas. South Australia will hold 120 auctions, most in Adelaide. Western Australia, Tasmania and the Northern Territory will hold 18 auctions between them. And the ACT will host 80 auctions. Taking a look at the most viewed properties going to auction this weekend. And in New South Wales, the top property is number 232 Woolcott Street, Waverton. This 4-bedroom townhouse has a price guide of $2.4 million. Top property in Victoria is 14 Oxley Road, Hawthorn. This 4-bedder has a pool in the backyard. Price guide is 2.2 to 2.4 million. The most viewed home in Queensland is 120 Shorncliffe Parade, Shorncliffe. This 4-bedder has nice ocean views. Top property in South Australia is 22 Cummings Street, Blackwood. This 4-bedroom home has a price guide of $790,000 to $860,000. And the top property in the ACT is number 10 Calvert Street, Ainslie. This 5-bedroom home sits on about 900 square metres. And the most viewed property on the REA Group website this week is number 54 Fellows Street, Kew in Melbourne. It looks like the perfect place for a Bond villain. This newly built home has been designed by a company called Martin Friedrich Architects. Each of the 5 bedrooms has an ensuite. The home comes with formal and informal living areas, 2 studies, a powder room, gym, and space for 7 cars in the basement, which also has an electric vehicle charger. It has a heated swimming pool, spa, cinema, billiards room, and a massive wine cellar with a large table for wine tasting. The home spans 4 levels. It's got a lift, sculptured staircase, and a 4-storey curved granite feature wall. The price guide for this one is $11 to $12 million, and expressions of interest close on the 12th of September. Well, for more on property, I caught up with Cameron Kusher from REA Group a little earlier.
Yeah, it's a very strong number of properties going to auction at this time of year, and I think it reflects the fact that we have seen this upswing in new listings, mainly in Sydney and Melbourne over the last couple of months. Compared to the same time last year, there's 10% more properties going to auction this week than the same week last year. So quite a high number of properties going to auction. And I think it reflects the fact that there's this renewed confidence from vendors to put their properties on the market at the moment.
Yeah, when those properties do go to auction, how are auction clearance rates holding up?
Yeah, they're holding up quite well. So we're seeing auction clearance rates around the 65 to 70% range over the last few weeks, which is reflective of a market where prices are growing and most properties are successfully selling. So, really strong auction clearance rates for this time of year. And as you mentioned, it's really a very early start to spring. We typically don't see this many properties going to auction or even coming to the market. Most people tend to wait until the spring selling season, but it started early this year.
This week, the Labor government announced plans to build 1.2 million homes over the next 5 years, with the idea to pay state governments incentives if they miss their targets. Is this a good policy idea?
I think it's a good idea to try and incentivise more housing. We desperately need more housing here in the country. It's pretty light on detail coming out of National Cabinet exactly what's going to happen. And I think, the changing of planning laws and trying to densify inner city areas is greatly needed. But I think we need a little bit more detail about how are we going to get developers to bring this stock to the market, who's going to build all this housing, who's going to buy all this housing, given that we're already seeing this massive slowdown in purchasing of brand new properties, and equally, where is this housing going to go, and who is going to fund it? Because it was easy to fund this sort of stuff when interest rates were the lowest they've ever been. But development finance, construction finance, and even to go and purchase a property at the moment, the interest rates on that borrowing are significantly higher. So there's still quite a few question marks, but I think we're delivering a framework to try and get more housing delivered, and I think that's really positive.
Yeah, is this one of the biggest challenges facing our government, the severe lack of housing in Australia?
It certainly is, particularly when we're running such a strong rate of migration to the country. You know, most people that show up in Australia don't have a house. So initially we're feeling this in the rental market, but longer term, if they decide they want to stay, they're going to need somewhere to live as well. So we can already see rents are rising very rapidly. Most capital cities have seen advertised rents rise about 14% over the past 12 months. But if we don't fix the supply, then that's going to start escalating property prices as well. So it certainly is a big headache for the government, big headache for people that are living here trying to find somewhere to live, and something that needs to be addressed. So it is positive to see that there's at least some initial moves to try and free up supply and get more housing built.
Yeah, you touched on this a second ago, but it looks like you guys released a property listings report at REA Group earlier this week. And what's that showing? That property listings in Sydney and Melbourne are doing really well right now?
Yeah, they are. So what we saw is the number of new listings in both of those cities was up about 14% from where it was 12 months ago. The last probably 9 to 12 months has been very weak for new listings, and that's because interest rates have been rising and vendors have been very reluctant to bring stock to the market. The feedback we've got is, I can sell my property, but where am I going to go? There's nowhere to rent, there's nothing to buy. But it looks like with interest rates seemingly at a peak or very close to a peak, we've now got that circuit breaker and vendors are once again willing to bring properties to the market. Importantly, though, it's only really in Sydney and Melbourne today. We haven't seen an upswing in new listings in the other capital cities, but perhaps that will come over the next few months as people see what happens in Sydney and Melbourne, and hopefully people successfully sell those properties. It'll encourage more stock to the market.
Commonwealth Bank, it reported its results last week, said distressed loans increased very slightly during the recent financial year, but they are expecting bad debts to increase. If more Aussies do start struggling with their loans, will that do anything to the property prices and the property market?
Potentially. I mean, what we've seen over recent years is mortgage arrears have been the lowest they've ever been. So it's, you know, with interest rates going from, you know, mortgage rates of around 2% to 6%, it's reasonable to expect that there is going to be some increase in mortgage arrears and hardship. The big question, though, will be how does that play out in supply? And I think if we get a meaningful and persistent increase in the number of properties coming to the market to sell, then that should lead to lower property price growth. And depending on how long that hangs around, it could actually lead to some prices starting to fall again. So depending on your situation, that might not necessarily be a bad thing, given that we've just come off an astronomical period of growth in prices through the pandemic, and now prices are already starting to rise again in most areas.
Cameron Kusher from REA Group, thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Ed.